A little girl with beautiful blue eyes was nervous. Her name was Tatiana. A man with long, fiery red hair beckoned the girl to him. Right now, the girl faced the biggest dilemma of her 4-year-old life. Tatiana felt out of place. She was terribly worried. A handsome, large man picked up the baby. The brunette holding the girl declared that Titi's time on someone's lap should be divided equally, 10 minutes at a time. The long-haired man said it depended on the child, and the other man had no right to make such a statement. The red-haired man said the girl wanted to come with him, but the brunette said his interlocutor must have vision problems. Titi intervened and told the men not to fight. But another man interrupted Tatiana's agreement. He seemed to glow, with snow-white hair and an equally snow-white outfit. He asked why everyone was acting so childish. He reminded his, apparently, friends that they had agreed not to quarrel in front of Tatiana. The handsome dark-haired man's name was Siegfried. The red-haired man said Siegfried wanted to monopolize the child, but he objected, saying that Kyrios, the long-haired man's name, hadn't kept the agreement from the start. The snow-white man said their quarrel should be continued elsewhere. Suddenly, the fair-haired man said that it was his turn to hold the child on his lap. It was unbearable for Tatiana. She couldn't understand why grown men behaved like this. The only Duke of the Empire and Master of the Sword was none other than Siegfried von Orleans. The ruler of the Magic Tower was Kyrios Erhard, and he was also a great magician. And the Snow-White Man, the High Priest, who embodied the Catalyst of Light, his name was Caesar. All these men are true heroes. They saved the kingdom by defeating the 5 demon kings, and now, these 3 are the most powerful in the Empire. And now they're arguing about whose lap she should sit on. Neither of them wants to give in to this heated argument, and the reason is, they're all competing to be her father. This was never part of her original plans. How the hell did they end up in this situation? In the end, the guys decided to ask Tatiana herself where she wanted to sit. She was surprised. Was it strange that they were asking themselves that? And anyway, she's too young to sit on their laps. If the girl chooses one, the others will be offended. It's better to change the subject completely. The girl asked her dads not to fight. She said she didn't like it when they fought. The men immediately began apologizing, saying they were wrong. The girl was glad that it seemed to be working. Now is not the time to relax. If these men discover the girl's true identity, it will all be over. After all, she is the enemy of these heroes. The last villain who will bring destruction to this world, the Demon Lord. One day, when the girl opened her eyes, she realized that she had been reborn as the final boss of the novel. The girl was born a human-demon hybrid. She had an unhappy childhood, being sold again and again on the slave market. She has not yet received the prophecy from the demon god and been named the Demon Lord. But, being a half-breed and too young, Tatiana, since her appointment as the ruler of the demons caused discontent among high-ranking demons. They imprisoned her in the castle before she could awaken her true power, and for years they exploited and mistreated her, pretending to be demon lords. Later, the prince, the protagonist of the novel, invades the Demon King's castle. She destroys the demons who stole her power and saves Tatiana, but there's one catch. After a long time trapped in grief and despair, she awakens as a true demon lord. Ultimately, she dies at the prince's hands. At the age of 4, just like in the original story, she is locked in the Demon Lord's castle and lives as a slave. Why, of all the possible reincarnations, did it have to be such a pathetic character? Ever since she realized she'd been reincarnated as Tatiana, she'd been trying to escape. But in the end, she remained a puppet and slave to high-ranking demons. The girl was cleaning and decided she needed to finish before lunch, when suddenly someone hit her. There were 2 demons. One asked the girl why she thought the demon god had chosen a filthy half-breed like her as the demon lord. The 2 demonic thugs were here again. She just had to pretend to be scared and endure it. Tatiana didn't answer. One of them asked if she thought she was strong, even with so little power. The girl was merely the pet of 5 kings. The girl would gladly hit them on the back of the head, but no matter how angry she gets, she has to put up with it. They were demons, and she was just a child. Tatiana hadn't yet awakened her powers. The second one ordered her to clean everything in the room. As he left, the demon said the only reason she was still alive was because of them. She smiled and wished them a good day. If the girl awakened as a demon lord, there would be nothing left of these idiots. But if she unleashes her power, what will happen next? An original story of this world, where the protagonist defeats the demon lord, preventing the destruction of the world, and creating a happy future for everyone. It's a banal plot, but now that she's been reborn as a villain, it's even more cruel than she could have ever imagined. Despite her talent, the girl has been abused and exploited her entire life, all the while dreaming of a future where she could find simple happiness. When even her last hope vanished after the prince killed her. What must she have felt at that moment? Tatiana didn't know how long it had been since she'd had a normal conversation with anyone. The girl thought that if this continued, one day she would end up the same way. Suddenly, something crashed outside. Then again, and people's screams began to be heard. Tatiana looked out the window and froze. This atmosphere, it's not just a quarrel between demons. Someone has infiltrated the demon castle. But who the hell could it be? Who had the courage to break into a demon castle? There were 3 men. They had spent much longer than expected attacking the castle. Of the 5 demon kings, only 1 remained. The hero's endurance was already at its limit. Caesar told Siegfried that now was the time. He said he would support him from behind. The final blow must be dealt. Siegfried obeyed. There was no time to hesitate. This was their last chance, even if it cost them their lives. The battle was over. They had finally destroyed all the demon kings, but it looked like they wouldn't return from here alive. Siegfried heard a voice in his head. It was so far away he couldn't make it out. Suddenly, he woke up in a hospital bed, and next to him was a little girl calling out to him. She was very happy that the man had finally woken up. Apparently, she had been worried. The girl asked if he was okay, and Siegfried himself was surprised at what the child was doing there. A few hours earlier, little Tatiana opened the heavy wooden door and looked around. Chaos reigned all around. The girl came out as soon as everything calmed down. There were bloodstains and scattered weapons everywhere. There wasn't a single intact object left here. She found 5 demon kings lying on the floor. With such wounds, they couldn't be alive. This means that the demons that were directly sucking out her power have also disappeared. She is finally free. Tatiana thought she'd stay here forever, but this sudden freedom feels overwhelming. Now that she thinks about it, with 5 kings dead. So someone invaded the demon castle, but then who exactly were these attackers? Could it be that those people who lay unconscious on the floor, the ones who defeated the 5 demon kings? Given the current situation, the prince, the hero of the original story, should still be a child. So, could this be true? These people, could they be the legendary heroes mentioned in the novel? Heroes of a previous generation? Long ago, the heroes attacked the demon king's castle, only to be cursed and meet their deaths. Even so, the heroine never managed to escape, so she didn't pay it much mind. So, the heroes believed that the 5 demon kings were the real enemies. Although in reality, the true demon king is someone else. And to be honest, it's, of course, Tatiana. Does that mean they were supposed to die? The girl noticed something. It was a magical stone used to store dark energy. Now that she thought about it, she could sense her own magic emanating from these people. Now Tatiana understands. The 5 demon kings used magical stones to channel her power. The previous heroes must have realized this and destroyed the stones during the battle. The so-called demon king's curse that killed the heroes was actually caused by the girl's magic. Ultimately, she was left alone and captured by demons once again, only to become the demon king's puppet. If this was just a pretext, then more than a decade later, the invasion of the human world began. Everything fits. If everything goes according to the original scenario, she will die at the hands of the prince. So what to do now? The original plan was to escape immediately. But in the fragile body of a child, she won't be able to get far before she'll be captured or killed. But that's how the original story unfolded. Now, at least, the girl has the intelligence of a grown, wise woman. She needs to figure out how to survive without losing control of her magic. Wait, in the original story, Tatiana was doomed to lose control due to the cruel treatment she suffered in the Demon King's castle. Therefore, if Tatiana ensures her safety, she can avoid this fate. If the girl plays her cards right, she might even be able to safely awaken as a demon lord. Once she becomes one, she will be incredibly powerful. She has not 1, but 3 perfect protectors who can ensure her safe escape from the Demon King's castle. She would save them, and then use their power to escape from here. That's why the girl looked after them for several hours. And finally, someone regained consciousness. He looks normal, which is good, but why does his gaze seem so frightening? Suddenly, the man grabbed her by the collar and lifted her up. What was he doing? He asked who she was. She said he could call her Titi. Siegfried coldly replied that he had not asked her name. He had asked for her identity. The girl said she was a human slave, kidnapped by demons. Zig said dark energy circulated around her body. The man told her she had to answer correctly. Otherwise, he would have no choice but to consider her a demon and destroy her. Suddenly, he asked that maybe she was the hidden demon lord. Tatiana said it was simply impossible. She admitted that she was half human, half demon. The man asked again. It was unclear how to feel about such hybrids of humanity and evil. Is this even possible? Humans and demons may look similar, but they're completely different species. Moreover, a hybrid between a demon, whose members categorically reject other species, and a human. If this is true, then it's not at all unlikely that this child lived as a slave to a secretive demon lord. She certainly looks more human than demon. She also has a faint demonic aura. Arrogant demons even treat their own children as slaves if they're not purebred. However, there are many doubts about this. He asked how old TT was. The girl said she was 4 years old. Isn't that too young? At that age, a girl should be with her family. Siegfried understood she was a slave, but there was one thing he needed to clarify. There had never been a half-human, half-demon before. Did she know that? She said she knew because her mother had told her, but her mother had told her to keep it a secret so the girl wouldn't be discovered. In his confusion, Siegfried completely forgot that this child must have parents somewhere. He wanted to ask about the mother, but changed his mind. If only her parents were alive, but did not leave the child as a slave in such a dangerous place. Now that Siegfried had asked the girl everything, she asked him to let her go. He apologized and let the little girl go. The man asked why Tatiana was helping them. She replied that her mother told her to. She said that Titi should help sick people, so that they do not suffer. And yet Siegfried, who considered himself a hero, forgot such a simple truth, simply because this was the castle of a demon lord. He was threatening a small, fragile child. He promised that he would definitely repay her for saving them someday. The girl told him to have a good rest. Now that the tension has eased, the man can finally see the situation clearly. This time, Siegfried thought they would all die, but they lived. The demonic energy that had consumed them had vanished, probably because the demon lords, the source of the energy, had all been killed. Before entering the castle, the heroes had also destroyed the external forces. They were safe for now. The girl had already thought she'd been caught. How had he sensed her demonic energy? Luckily, he asked the expected questions. Indeed, Siegfried seems like a true paranoid. In her haste, the girl pleaded non-existent mother, and fortunately, he believed her. In fact, now that the girl thinks about it, she's angry. She went through so much trouble dragging them to the infirmary and treating them, and instead of repaying the favor, he grabbed her by the scruff of the neck. Suddenly, the girl started coughing. Suddenly, blood started coming from her mouth. The side effects of demonic energy were showing. Demons usually have their own unique demonic energy, but if they have too much or too little of it, they may suffer side effects such as vomiting blood or fainting. In the past, TT would sometimes vomit blood when the 5 demon lords drained her demonic energy. This time, it was likely due to overexertion while regenerating the previous hero's demonic energy. A normal demon would have been able to handle their demonic energy just fine. But as a young half-human, the girl has a hard time controlling it. If she's not careful, it could drain her life force. And yet, the reason she remains calm, the original Tatiana fully awakens as a demon lord at the age of 25. Essentially, a demon lord can control demonic energy, so at least she won't die from inability to control it. Titi has 21 years before she becomes a demon lord. During that time, she must find a way to control the energy. The heroes took care of the demons that were troubling her, so she was able to explore parts of the demon lord's castle that she hadn't seen before. The girl entered the room. It was a luxurious laundry room, a place she'd never heard of in the demon lord's castle, and she was completely unharmed, untouched by the battle. But she was angry. The girl was stuck in that filthy corner while they were enjoying the high life. The girl needed to gather everything she needed, since she didn't know how the situation might change. Tatiana grabbed a first aid kit. TT collected a bunch of things and exhaled, because she had collected almost everything she needed. Now she needed to grab some towels. But how? They were way up high. There was no chance of tiptoeing to reach them. Siegfried came up from behind and offered his help to the little girl. The girl asked Siegfried to make noise when he moved, otherwise the man would frighten her. Siegfried got out some towels. Tatiana thought, this man, when he was lying there, had a sword next to him, right? The only one of the previous heroes who used a sword was a swordmaster, so this man must be Siegfried. He's already up and walking, the strongest of men, but with such an absurd recovery rate. Yet, when she treated him, that jet black hair, those cold golden irises, he is incredibly handsome. The man stood with towels and asked if he could put them in the basket. The girl was glued to his face without even realizing it. The man inquired about the basket. TT replied that she'd found it while sorting through useful items. He asked if she was taking it all with her. Tatiana said yes. She'll drag it across the floor. By dragging it, she means it's too heavy for her. Siegfried took the basket. The girl wanted to protest, but he said it was fine. At the girl's pace, it would take 10 years to move the basket. TT asked if he should do that, since he was injured. Zig replied that he wasn't sick enough to force a child to work like that. He acts so cold. If the girl hadn't extracted the demonic energy from him, he wouldn't look at me like that. Siegfried asked why she looked like that. He thought he'd done something wrong. Tatiana said it was nothing. Oh, he noticed the girl frown for just a second. Zig asked why she was avoiding eye contact then. She asked what he meant. She wasn't avoiding anything. Why was he so insistent? Suddenly, the path was blocked. The girl was surprised. Who was this man? When did he manage to wake up and come here? With fiery hair up in a fringe and dark green eyes, the man asked, "What is this basket? And who is this child following Siegfried like a turd following a goldfish?" This man is the great mage Kyrios, one of the legendary heroes, and a great mage, the ruler of the magical tower. Kyrios! The girl didn't understand the expression about the poop and the goldfish. She couldn't be angry at someone who saved her life. Tatiana will simply endure this for the sake of her bright future. The girl greeted Kyrios and introduced herself. Titi said she brought bandages and medicine. He was injured, so the girl asked to let her treat his wounds. But the man remained silent. Tatiana, are you talking to a wall? Will it kill him if he answers? Siegfried turned to Kyrios. He understood that his friend was on edge for various reasons, but the fact remained. This child had healed their wounds. Kyrios asked, "Who knows? They shouldn't let their guard down just because she patched them up a bit. How can they trust a child they met in the Demon Lord's castle? What if this little one has some hidden agenda? What then? Had the girl been exposed? Her plan to raise protectors had run into a serious obstacle. Sieg told Titi to ignore Kyrgios. He was naturally mentally unstable. Maybe Tatiana is imagining things? But Siegfried looks a little sorry. No, now was not the time. Her precious potential protectors must not quarrel. The girl said it was all fine. She was used to people not liking her. Kyrgios relaxed for a moment and changed his expression. But then, as if embarrassed, his stern expression returned. Sieg said that if he was sorry, he should just say so, but Kyrgios snapped and asked who told him he was sorry. Siegfried apologized to Tatiana on behalf of the mage and said it looked like the boy would never grow up. Kyrgios asked who allowed him to be slandered right in front of him. The girl repeated that everything was really fine. She could come to terms with the fact that she wasn't loved. Kyrgios said they needed to check on Caesar anyway. He still hadn't woken up. The girl said she'd go too. The redhead asked what help a brat like her could possibly be. They said Caesar suffered the most in the battle. This makes sense, as Caesar should be more vulnerable to demonic energy than the other two. The high priest Caesar, with silver hair that sparkled with holy power, snow-white eyelashes and skin. This man, a hero who uses holy power, as befits his title as a high priest. Since holy power and demonic energy are opposing forces, he is inevitably more vulnerable to demonic energy than other heroes. That's why the two heroes had already awakened, but Caesar still hadn't. Tatiana asked for the basket to be passed to her. Siegfried said he was going to put it on the table. Tatiana needs to cure Caesar as soon as possible in order to quickly implement her plan to raise heroic defenders. Even though the girl extracted demonic energy, the wounds already saturated with it won't heal, even with holy power. Medications might help, but ultimately, he needs to heal naturally. The girl asked to be allowed to disinfect the wound and change the bandages first. She was asked if she was going to treat him. Siegfried said that he could take full responsibility for Caesar's treatment. But Titi objected, saying she could do it too. She'd been doing it for them all this time. However, they both unraveled it. The girl opened the jar. She asked them to look at her more favorably. She began pouring a large amount of medicine onto the wound. Kyrgios guessed it must be really burning. The girl knew she'd screwed up. The medicine had spilled everywhere. First, I had to wipe it up, and then apply a bandage. The girl couldn't cope. Kyrgios began to bandage him. Suddenly, Caesar began to wake up, and everyone fell silent. He opened his eyes and asked where he was. The girl didn't know what to do, since he was the high priest. She planned to quickly heal him and disappear before he woke up. High priest Caesar, who receives the love of the god of light, which according to the original story, causes him to despise demons more than the love of the three heroes. If Caesar somehow sensed demonic energy, he turned to it. He asked, "Did the god of light really send an angel?" Caesar noticed everyone's surprise and apologized for the misunderstanding. He decided to ask who the young lady was. She introduced herself. Kyrgios started cursing at the priest. What was wrong with him? He was only paying attention to some child he'd never seen before. Caesar asked if he should really be so concerned about a bunch of grown men. Kyrgios assumed the girl was simply endearing him. Caesar said there were no rules that prevented a priest from appreciating cuteness. All the world's adorable creatures deserve to be cared for, including small animals and such angelic children. The same applies to the young lady standing before him. When you look at such a charming and sweet child like this, isn't it natural to mistake her for an angel? The girl was afraid Caesar would sense her magic and reject her, but he seemed to have a soft spot for children and animals. What a relief! The man asked if she was the one who had cared for him. The girl replied that she was. What should she do? She'd wrapped those bandages so terribly. The girl's plan to earn points for healing him was ruined. Caesar remarked that the girl must have worked hard, caring for them all on her own. He thanked Tatiana. Phew! Operation winning the hero's favor hasn't failed yet. The man remembered he hadn't yet introduced himself and told them his name. From now on, he asked to be called simply Caesar. Tatiana thought he was kind. Was the high priest sure he didn't have wings or something like that on his back? Compared to the grumpy Kyrgios or the aloof Siegfried, he was incredibly sweet. The high priest said he looked forward to him and Tatiana getting along. After Caesar woke up, Titi thought he was hungry, so she headed to the kitchen. Kyrgios, suspicious as always, decided to follow the girl. Entering the kitchen, he asked if this was really the kitchen. There was even a warding spell on the cabinet there. Everything here is luxurious, except for the place where little Tatiana lived. Kyrgios was also surprised by such luxury, and decided to find some ingredients. For the patient, soup is the best choice. Something light and easily digestible will help them recover faster. Kyrgios said Caesar could probably handle the iron. He's awake now, so he's fine. He'll be fine in no time, so Titi has nothing to worry about. The man didn't understand why he was explaining all this. The girl said he was simply getting carried away by the conversation. He ordered Tatiana to lay out the ingredients and stay there. The girl wanted to object, but Kyrgios didn't let her say a word. He said that messing with fire and knives was unacceptable at her age. If the girl got hurt, Caesar would kill him. The man repeated his order again, and this time the girl obeyed, surprised by his sternness. Kyrios discovered that the stove was powered by magical energy. In an instant, it burst into a colossal flame. He paused. Even after all the reproaches and cold treatment, Titi didn't look at all frightened. Most 4-year-olds would have been by now. Kyrgios called the little girl. He thought it would be strange, but he asked anyway. Why wasn't she crying? She didn't understand his question. Kyr asked if the girl was scared by her current situation. Most children would cry in such a situation. Why was she acting so grown up? Titi said she was scared. But if she keeps acting up and upsetting the adults here, something even worse could happen. She can't let that happen. Kyrgios couldn't believe a child was saying that. In his slightly aggressive manner, Kyr told her that no one was going to harm the girl. Tatiana noticed that he truly understood. She decided to play the sympathy card and said that Kyrgios didn't like her anyway. He tried to justify himself, but the girl said everything was fine. Titi confessed. She may look human, but she's a half-breed, and demons don't like her, because the demonic energy coursing through her makes them uncomfortable. This girl says that even demons tormented her in this place, just because she's a hybrid. She's only 4 years old, without a single adult to rely on. Kyrgios felt he needed to ask Zig for details. The redhead told the girl she was being loud, and that she should keep quiet. The girl thought that the sympathy card hadn't worked, but anyway, something really smelled delicious. Tatiana reminded the magician that Caesar needed to eat something light. Kyrgios said the priest wouldn't die from eating. Titi coughed again. She thought it was over, but she was coughing again because of the demonic energy. She couldn't let Kyrgios see this. But the man noticed and asked what was wrong with the girl. Tatiana replied that she just had a sore throat. She said she needed to go to the bathroom and ran away. She can't let him find out. Tatiana thought the blood she coughed up last time was the end of it all, but right now, the side effects of her energy restoration are starting to manifest again. Had the girl really pushed herself too hard? At times like this, it's best to sleep until your body recovers. Tatiana decided that she would simply say that she was very tired and go to bed early. The girl entered the room where the men were eating. Caesar was delighted to see Titi and offered to share a meal, but she declined, saying she'd go to bed early. Caesar was surprised at how early she left. She said she wanted to sleep and rest alone. The priest said that rest was good, but skipping meals was not a good idea. He offered to take some food with her. The girl agreed and thanked the man. Finally, Kyrgios could ask what he wanted. He turned to Siegfried and asked, "Who is this girl? Who is she that was in the castle of the demon lord himself?" Siegfried said, "According to her, she is a half-breed, the child of a human and a demon, and she was a slave in the castle of the demon lord." Kyrgios was astonished. Kyrgios said there had never been a single half-breed before. Sieg didn't believe it at first, either. For the first time in his life, Sieg felt demonic energy, barely, and since she was the only one alive and unharmed in the place everyone had fled, Sieg initially thought she was a hidden demon lord. At the same time, there's something human about her, and Kyrgios sensed that too, didn't he? Caesar said he agreed with Siegfried. The moment he first saw her, he sensed a faint yet demonic energy. Kyrgios asked if Sieg was sure he wasn't pretending she was a good girl, that she was a sweet girl. Caesar said that Miss Tatiana was indeed sweet, but he wouldn't judge her by appearance alone. Kyrgios said that if what she said was true, her life must still be very difficult. Just looking at her, you could tell she was far from healthy. Dry, brittle hair and a thin, fragile body, torn clothes, which show that she knew no love at all. The only thing that still shone in this girl were her bright, jewel-like eyes. Caesar said that given how sensible she must be for her age, she had no choice but to grow up quickly. That may be true, but if you're incapable of feeling even a shred of compassion for such a child, then, Siegfried said he'd just keep an eye on her for now, so stop picking on him. The boys decided to get some sleep. The next day, Kyrgios asked why that annoying girl wasn't here today. Siegfried was also worried. It was already midday. She hadn't simply overslept. The high priest also found this odd. For the past few days, she had been appearing in the mornings, always wandering around in a fussy manner. The boys were very worried about little Tatiana. Kyrgios was equally worried, though he said she irritated him. Caesar thought she was sick. Mac decided to take matters into his own hands and suggested the boys go look for the girl. They decided to check all the other rooms. Siegfried said they had inspected every place. Caesar was amazed at the number of spacious and clean rooms. They wandered into an underground prison, and Kyrgios said that the girl would never have stayed in that place, but they continued searching anyway. Men walked through the dark dungeon, shouting the girl's name, and yet, she was there. When Kyrgios saw her, he turned pale. The boys saw a small ball of hair curled up on the cold tiled floor of the dungeon. Kyrgios said she had a fever, and asked what the hell she was doing in such a place. She woke up and was surprised. She asked the boys why they had come all this way here. Kyrgios told her to just lie there and not try to get up. The priest also told her to lie there. The girl said everything was fine, but Kyrgios snapped at her and asked how she could say that right now. Caesar admonished him to stop yelling at sick Titi. The little girl started coughing again. Why now? Suddenly the girl started feeling dizzy and seeing things. There were demons. They despised her, saying it would have been better to kill the girl and wait for a new demon lord. The voices continued to speak. These vile demons wanted to take Tatiana's place as God's representatives. She began to banish the voices from her head. The young girl felt very bad about the fact that no one liked her, and that everyone said that Titi was useless. Did the real Tatiana really suffer this much? The little girl wanted to escape this living hell. If there were no heroes there, the girl would be forever exploited by the greater demons. It seemed to the girl that the heroes were leaving and moving away from her, and she was trying to catch up with them. Tatiana understood that if they left, she would never escape this hell. She wouldn't be able to leave the demon realm and safely grow up. All her revenge on the demons might come to naught. It turned out it was all a dream. Titi was lying on the bed while three guys sat over her, worried. She mumbled in her sleep and begged them not to leave. Kyrios turned to the high priest and asked if he could heal the girl with his divine power. Kyrios replied that, unfortunately, he couldn't. Even if she was half human, she still had demonic blood running through her. Her body is closer to that of a human, but it seems her own demonic energy is attacking her. Demonic energy and divine power are opposites, and this could harm her. The redhead wondered how they were supposed to heal her. Was there really no way to cure her? No one can get rid of demonic energy, so Titi must deal with it and overcome it herself. There is no other way. Kyrgios wondered if the girl would die if there was no way out. Caesar told him not to be so pessimistic. Zig said that instead of getting upset and assuming she was doomed, he should think about how he could help her. Caesar and Kyrgios agreed with their friend. The girl's condition had noticeably worsened, and her temperature had begun to rise. The priest told the red-haired man to go get a towel and cold water, and if there was any fever reducer, to take that too. Siegfried decided to go with him. The men wandered all over the estate, searching. First, they needed to find a clean towel and some fever-reducing medication. As they walked, the boys were amazed at the gigantic size of the place where they found themselves. Siegfried thought that when he first saw Tatiana in this place, she was healthy. Kyrgios approached Zig and shared that he still didn't trust the little girl a little. Kyrgios understood absolutely nothing. Half-breed? That didn't make any sense. On top of that, she was found in the Demon Lord's castle. If she's up to something, she could have been sent by demons, and she deliberately approached them. Then, Siegfried and Caesar could find themselves in great danger, such that it is difficult to even imagine. But if this little girl was telling the truth, Kyrgios might regret doubting her now. Sieg understood how the mage felt. He too had doubted her when he first saw her. But she's just a 4-year-old child, nothing more. A tiny, defenseless creature. She cared for them with the same selflessness after all, so perhaps they can trust her at least a little. Even if the little girl does something, they can easily stop her. The guys are more than capable of handling it, so why shouldn't Kyrgios try to relax a little? Siegfried suggested they stop overthinking and get down to business. If they were late, Caesar's grumbling would become unbearable. Right now, treating this little child was more important than anything else. It's pleasantly cool, but at the same time so gentle. It's been so long since anyone has taken care of Tatiana. Wait, who's taking care of her right now? Caesar was nearby and was glad to see the young lady awake. He asked how she was feeling. Now that the girl thinks about it, she feels good. The imbalance caused by the magic has stabilized. Zig and Kyrgios entered the room. They were relieved to see TT was okay. The mage immediately flew up to the girl and asked why she lived in such a squalid room. He was ready to destroy all the demons for her sake. Now the girl thought about it. She was in one of the 5 demon lords' bedrooms. When had she been transported here? Siegfried admonished the mage again, saying that the little girl had only just woken up and there was no need to be so nervous. He finally admitted that he had simply been nervous. But Zig agreed with Kyrgios's words. Why did she stay in that old room? The demons had been defeated, so there must be plenty of free rooms. Tatiana hadn't even considered it. Even if all the demon lords were dead, Titi, the real demon lord, was hiding behind them. And since history wasn't unfolding the way she expected, if the boys found out, they wouldn't just scold her and leave everything as is. Even though not much time had passed since entering the world of this novel, she tried to appear unperturbed. But the truth was, enduring the demon's torture was unbearable. Just in case the demons came back and found out, she didn't have the courage. Caesar placed his hand on the girl's tiny hand and told her that she had nothing to worry about. Kyrgios said that if they showed up, the men would beat them up. Caesar asked the magician to watch his language in Lady Tatiana's presence. Kyrgios asked the girl if there was anything she wanted to destroy. The priest asked if they should start with the room of the most terrible demon. Caesar said that while the girl was sleeping, they determined that Tatiana was closer to a human child. They couldn't just leave her in this environment. So the priest asked if the girl would like to go with them. She tried to make the heroes her protectors in order to survive, but now that Tatiana actually hears the words she was hoping for, it seems completely unreal. Can she really trust them? The girl said she was half demon, and heroes hate demons. Zig said they had gone through so much for the freedom of humanity and fair treatment of all races, for the realization of a world in which no one would suffer. It would be strange if they ignored such a fragile child. He added that no matter whose blood flows in the girl's veins, she is just a child who deserves protection. So the girl didn't have to worry about such things at all. The girl found herself crying. Kyrios was about to scold Siegfried for the little girl's tears, but Siegfried didn't want the girl to cry. This is the first time in her entire life, and not only in the previous one, but in this one too. She's never experienced such kindness. Someone is attentive to her feelings and stays by her side, worrying when she's in pain or causing a panic simply because she's crying. So this is what it's like to have protectors. The little girl wiped drops of salty tears from her face. Tatiana said that she was very happy that the guys asked her to go with them. Caesar said he saw it. When emotions run high, this can happen. But if the girl cries a lot, it will tire her out, and she shouldn't overexert herself. The girl tried to prove she wasn't crying, but her face said it all. Kyrios suggested they go to the Empire tomorrow. And so the girl left the lonely, cold castle of the Demon Lord, going to the capital with the heroes. Tatiana was very surprised by the capital. It looked like a city where a fairy tale princess would live. Caesar noticed the girl's excitement and said that it might be a little different from the place she lived in before, but she would quickly get used to it. Kyrios added that if anyone were to bother the young lady, he would quickly get rid of the source of the discomfort. The girl looked out the window, as if bewitched, and Siegfried told her to sit down normally, as it was not safe. The magician reminded them that there was one more important matter to attend to before they arrived. The girl immediately became interested. The question arose, who would now care for the child? Tatiana was surprised by this question. Zig asked the mage if he had to raise such a topic in front of the child. He replied that from now on, this would be the baby's home, and that this had to be decided before arriving in the Empire. Siegfried said it had been a long time since Kyrios had said anything sensible. At first, the heroes thought about finding her a good home, but they don't want to leave her in someone else's care, as she's half human and half demon, and she might feel uncomfortable. Since they had decided to care for her themselves, the priest wanted Miss TT to grow up healthy. The magician added that in case the demon awakened within the girl, it would be best if they looked after her directly. It's not that the demon inside her will necessarily awaken, but still for safety reasons. Caesar said that in any case, if one of them were to become a guardian, to suppress demonic energy, divine power was most effective, right? Naturally, as the high priest of the great temple and the first servant of the god of light, Caesar must become TT's guardian. Kyrios said the magic tower is filled with magic, and they'll definitely be able to handle a little chaos. Plus, the magic tower is full of interesting things the little one will love. Siegfried said they were both talking nonsense. His family, belonging to the most powerful knightly order in the Empire, was best suited to prepare for the awakening of Tatiana's demon. The girl decided to interrupt them. She offered to let all three of them be her guardians. She wants to get along with everyone. The heroes were touched by the girl's wish, and decided to do everything fairly. Siegfried noticed the girl trying to get up. He told her it wasn't safe. But Tatiana didn't listen. She leaped onto Zig's neck with all her might and thanked him. She promised to behave and not cause any trouble. This is a chance to find the greatest patrons. Naturally, she would like all three to become her guardians. After a long journey, they finally arrived in the imperial capital. And although TT had 3 guardians, for safety reasons, it was decided that her residence would be Duke Siegfried's mansion. The magic tower was dangerous due to magical incidents, and the temple could affect TT's health, so the mansion was the safest. Kyrios said he would visit the little girl frequently. Caesar and Kyrios had urgent business, so they went to the temple and the magic tower. After bidding them farewell, TT and the Duke entered the mansion. By the way, he looked simply magical. As soon as they entered, the servants immediately began bowing. A woman appeared on the horizon. She congratulated the Duke on his victory. It was the mansion's housekeeper, the Dowager Countess Ghiberti. Duke Siegfried praised everyone for their hard work at the mansion during his absence. Countess Ghiberti inquired who the young girl in the Count's arms was. The girl introduced herself. TT noticed the woman's rude look. Zig said he'd met Tatiana during the expedition and would be her guardian for a while. The woman asked again. Zig said TT would remain at the mansion. The Duke asked that the young guest's comfort be ensured. Ghiberti promised not to let the Duke down. The man thanked her and left with Tatiana. The girl looked at the Countess and began to feel a strange sensation. She realized she was definitely not welcome here. The Duke had a lot of business to attend to, so he had to leave. The maid thought that since her master had been absent for so long, he must have a mountain of work piling up. TT told him not to worry about her. Tatiana's goal was to be a child who didn't cause trouble, was obedient and useful. That way, she could remain protected. After Siegfried had left, the maid approached the girl and introduced herself. Her name was Nora. She said she and the young lady had recently met briefly. Tatiana remembered her. This girl was among the servants who met. The maid prepared a bath for the young lady. When TT finished, Nora would show her to her room. Tatiana thanked the girl. But why the sudden need for a bath? The girl glanced in the mirror and realized she was terribly dirty. TT thought if she tidied up, they'd treat her better. The bathroom was absolutely luxurious, and it smelled incredible. Nora had been helping with the bath from the start, hoping she wasn't causing any trouble. Titi said she could take it alone, but the maid still said she'd help. Tatiana said that Nora was busy, so the girl did not want to disturb the maid. Nora's face suddenly changed. The girl didn't understand what was happening. She felt even more awkward having someone bathe her. Come to think of it, the maid looked surprised when the young lady undressed. Nora noticed the girl's thinness. Titi wondered if it was because she disliked her, just like the young lady. Nora decided to ask how old the young lady was. Titi replied that she was 4. The maid was even more surprised. Even at such a young age, she insisted on washing herself, which is truly admirable. But if Tatiana doesn't allow Nora to help her, then the maid will have nothing to do. Of course, if the girl really doesn't want to, the maid won't force her. So what should Titi do? The girl finally asked for a little help. Nora thanked Tatiana, but don't people usually like to work? Suddenly, someone entered, and without knocking, a disgruntled woman entered. She asked why they weren't ready yet. This woman was the lady the girl had seen earlier, Countess Ghiberti. She entered the bathroom so tactlessly and unceremoniously that it was absolutely terrible behavior for a socialite. She was indignant, and very much so. The woman asked in a raised voice why the preparations weren't finished yet. Nora said the young lady's skin was very sensitive if they didn't do everything slowly, but the maid was interrupted. The countess said these were just excuses. It was taking so long because of her slowness. Are they really going to keep the Duke waiting? The woman asked them to speed up and finish quickly. The girl climbed out of the bath, but the woman still hadn't left. Nora started drying Tatiana, and the countess screamed. She hurried on and on. Ghiberti came over and said she'd take care of the girl herself. She started combing her hair, so hard that her scalp was pulled. It was incredibly painful. It felt like all of Titi's hair was about to be ripped out. The maid decided to point out that the young lady's hair was damaged and shouldn't be combed like that, because, well, of course, she was cut off again. Ghiberti said they couldn't keep the Duke waiting. The countess turned to Tatiana and asked her to be patient, even if it hurt, because a good child obeys adults well. The girl had suspected from the very beginning that something was wrong with her. Tears of pain were already welling up in the girl's eyes. Now, knowing that Titi must remember Siegfried too, she was gradually putting pressure on her. Now it became clear that being a good child is very difficult. The countess walked so quickly that the girl and Nora couldn't keep up with her. It's hard to keep up with such a difference in stride. I wonder why this woman walks so fast. The woman raised her voice again and urged the young lady on. The countess couldn't understand what was so special about this little girl. 30 minutes earlier, the countess had come to the Duke's office. Siegfried was looking for her. She asked if there was anything she could do to help Duke Siegfried. He called the woman here to talk about Tatiana. Ghiberti was his aunt. The child's health was not very good, so Zig asked for a personal doctor to be assigned to her to monitor her health. He also asked her to treat the girl as a member of the family. The woman was clearly not pleased. Ghiberti was still struggling to support the family in his absence, and now that he'd returned, he was asking her to take care of a child. He'd never shown such warmth to his own nephews. Besides, he was always cold and callous, never giving his heart to anyone. Suddenly, it dawned on the woman. Could Siegfried really be planning to adopt this child? If that happened, the Ghiberti children might not inherit the duchy. It was too early to make any assumptions. To ensure her inheritance of the duchy, she needed to maintain Siegfried's favor. The girl hurried inside. This child appeared out of nowhere. The woman decided she would gradually ensure that Tatiana left this place on her own. They entered. Duke Siegfried sat at a table, laden with a vast array of delicious-looking food. Sieg was waiting for a young girl. The girl asked if he was very busy. Siegfried said it was Tatiana's first day at the residence, and of course he would find time to have lunch with her. Titi asked if the Duke had come down to the dining room just to dine with her. Zig said he wasn't so busy that he couldn't have lunch with the girl, so she shouldn't worry about anything extra. Countess Ghiberti told the Duke not to worry, as she would personally take care of Tatiana. The girl was not happy about this. The woman also said that he should not force himself to find time just to spend it with the young lady. The Duke dryly replied no, and added that he was spending time with Tatiana because he wanted to. Siegfried appreciated his aunt's concern, but asked her not to say such things in the future. He didn't want Tatiana to misunderstand her words. The woman promised to be very careful from now on, but in her head, she was thinking that this girl was very annoying. Siegfried turned to Tatiana. She said the creamy stew Caesar had made the last time was the most delicious. The girl confirmed this with a smile from ear to ear and added that it was the best in the world. The Duke told her that the meat she would eat today would be much tastier. He guaranteed it. The girl thought he seemed a little angry. Siegfried turned to the girl again. He asked if there was anything inconvenient, or if she needed anything while she was staying here. Tatiana replied that there was nothing inconvenient, but there was something she wanted to do. The young lady wanted to visit the library. The man was greatly surprised by this and asked her why she wanted to visit the library. The girl's goal is to win over as many heroes as possible, to ensure her safety, and ultimately awaken as a demon lord. This library may contain materials that will help her awaken. Of course, she couldn't tell him everything as it was, so she needed a suitable excuse. After thinking for a moment, she blurted out that she wanted to be a useful child. If the girl reads a lot of books, she'll become smarter and be able to help Siegfried. He'll let her visit the library, but instead of trying to be useful, he'll tell her to do what brings her joy. If she doesn't handle this correctly, the girl might not be able to go to the library. She didn't want to use it, but she had no choice. The girl decided to play on her sympathy. She said that, in fact, her mother had said she liked going to the library. That's why Titi really wanted to go to the library too. She thought it would remind her of the time she spent there with her mother. Without even a second thought, the Duke allowed her to visit the library. The girl got her way and thanked Siegfried. The man softened when he heard the word mother. The Countess decided to intervene. She told the Duke that his family had many valuable books. Children Tatiana's age were prone to accidentally damaging them. The woman said she was worried that Lady Tatiana might damage these precious books. Siegfried replied that the books were important, but he could figure that out. Besides, the child he had decided to take care of was far more important to him. Naturally, Countess Ghiberti was angry. The Duke said the food was getting cold and suggested they finish their dinner first. Siegfried had just defended the girl, but at the same time maintained his respect for this woman. After Siegfried allowed the girl to go to the library, a pleasant lunch followed. It had been a long time since TT had eaten properly. The Duke's butler approached and whispered something in his ear. He heard, "His Majesty." The girl didn't understand what was happening. Siegfried stood up and turned to Tatiana, saying it looked like he needed to leave first. She thanked him for the dinner. The man said she was saying strange things. He asked her to finish her meal slowly and get a good rest today. As soon as the Duke left, Ghiberti began approaching the girl. She took the children's cutlery away from the girl and said that it would be much better for her to get used to adult cutlery from the very beginning. Ghiberti gave her the usual utensils. They are still too big for the girl to use. The Countess reveals her true colors as soon as Siegfried leaves. The woman asked why the young lady wasn't eating. Judging by the situation, it seemed she wouldn't back down until Titi used adult cutlery. Even if it's hard, Titi has to use them to end this. It's incredibly uncomfortable, but it's worth a try. She managed to scoop up some of the stew, but it was much heavier than she expected. At this rate, Titi might drop it. And then the spoon fell from the girl's hands and fell to the floor. And immediately, Ghiberti pounced on Tatiana. She said the girl couldn't handle cutlery properly, making a mess everywhere, and that she needed to learn the most basic rules of table etiquette. Nora said the girl heard everything the woman said, but Ghiberti also snapped at the maid, saying she shouldn't interrupt Nora when she was speaking. Did Nora really think the little brat even understand what she was saying? What presumption! Countess Ghiberti ordered Nora to clean up the mess that girl had made on the table. Tatiana has ears. Even if she's just a 4-year-old girl, saying that to her face is too much. The maid told Tatiana that what the Countess had just wanted to say was not quite, but Titi said it was fine. She didn't understand what the woman was talking about. The girl had made a mess during the meal because she hadn't yet learned table manners. Titi believed that such hostility was nothing compared to the demon castle. Nora declared that since adult cutlery was quite heavy, she would feed the girl instead. Once the girl finished her meal, the maid would give her a tour of her room. The girl couldn't believe the wonderful room they were in. It was her room. She'd never had such a stunning room. Nora was delighted that the girl liked her new room. In her joy, the girl grabbed the collar of Nora's dress, tore it slightly too much, and the maid said it was no big deal. It could be easily mended. Did Tatiana use too much force without realizing it? But something's not right here. This isn't just any ordinary material. These are the clothes worn by the Duke's servants, and yet it tore as easily as cheap fabric, even with the strength of a child like her? The maid noticed that the young lady must be very tired today, so she suggested that she go to bed early. Titi agreed. The bed in Titi's room was the best. Maybe it was because she always slept on hard beds in the Demon Lord's castle. Nora decided to leave the girl and, as she left, told her that if Tatiana needed anything, she could call her any time. They wished each other good night, and the maid left. The girl had expected just a decent room, but they actually gave her a very nice little room. For the first time since she'd inhabited this body, she'd had some privacy. Tatiana decided to set clear goals for the future. First, to maintain good relationships with the heroes. Somehow, she'd made all 3 of them her guardians, but the more TT could gain, the better. Secondly, avoid the protagonist of this world at all costs. In the original story, he was the one who beheaded her, so it's best to stay as far away from him as possible. Third, prepare for independence. Tatiana won't be able to live with the heroes forever. She needs to ensure financial security to stand on her own feet. And finally, she will awaken as the Demon Lord. If she awakens, which means becoming an untouchable absolute being, not only will the money issue be resolved, but most importantly, she will be able to solve the problem of her own body being attacked by demonic energy. And above all, TT will be able to confront the true villain of this novel. If she doesn't get rid of him, they will begin searching for her. The Demon Lord. The 5 demon lords who tormented her are already dead, but they are not the true mastermind behind the novel. This is the Bartoloa clan. Among them is the leader of the demons, and the second highest ranking immortal in the demonic realm. She must destroy the head of the Bartoloa family. With the hero's invasion of the castle, Bartoloa is likely too busy dealing with the aftermath. She can relax for now, but as soon as things calm down, they'll surely come to reclaim the girl. Even without the hero's protection, Tatiana needs a way to protect herself. If she can awaken as a demon lord as soon as possible, all these problems will be solved. Maybe the girl is thinking too much. She already feels too sleepy. The girl still has so much to figure out. The little one is already starting to fall asleep. Siegfried sat in the office of the head of the Orleans family. He'd expected this, but he didn't think things would be so messed up. He'd only been away from work for a short time, and now the work was piling up like crazy. It would be better to start sorting things out now, but he can't stop thinking about the girl. A normal child her age would just want to play, but is it normal for a 4-year-old girl to say she wants to study? It's worrisome when a child seems too mature, but it's not something he should decide on his own. He should discuss it with Kyrios and Caesar. The butler arrived. The Duke handed over the letter and ordered it to be sent to his friends. Zig asked what kind of treats children liked. The servant guessed who it was, and said that since the lady was still little, something sweet would do. The servant asked if he should ask the pastry chef to take care of it. To his surprise, Siegfried said he would do it himself. Some time later, the Duke stood at the door of Tatiana's room with a plate of cookies. She didn't open the door for a long time, so he decided to go in and found her drenched in a cold sweat. Tatiana had a dream. In it, she found herself back in the Demon Lord's castle. There was a man there, too. This man was the current head of the Bartoloa family. He glanced at the girl. She was small and plain. He handed her a red pill in his hand and ordered her to swallow the medicine. Tatiana was scared. She didn't understand what the pill was, and understandably didn't want to swallow it. But that man's eyes, that cold gaze, as if he were looking at a bug under his feet, so frightening that she couldn't even refuse. The girl swallowed the pill. Her magic began to spiral out of control. The girl begged for help, and the man rejoiced that it seemed the experiment had succeeded. Tatiana woke up. She jumped up and started coughing. The young woman thought she was about to die. Siegfried immediately rushed to her side, worried. She didn't understand what he was doing here with her. He looked at her with concern and asked what she had dreamed about. He stayed by Tatiana's side until she felt better. This thought warmed the girl's soul. She said she had a nightmare. Just because the girl has become close to the heroes doesn't mean she can let her guard down. If Titi isn't careful, she'll be dragged back to the Demon Lord's castle, and she won't be able to escape. The man hugged the girl and said that everything was fine, that he was not going anywhere, so she should not worry. The whole time, the girl held him tightly by the sleeve of his shirt. The man noticed this and asked what was bothering her. Siegfried smiled and reminded the girl that she didn't need to worry so much, even if the girl tried to act grown up because she didn't want to bother the heroes. Seeing her like this, Zig knew she was still just a child after all. He decided to call a doctor. Soon Tatiana fell asleep again, and her sleep was safe. The baby had slept well. She looked around and realized Zig was in her room, and then she remembered recent events. Did that mean he'd been here with Titi from last night until the morning? Siegfried woke up. The girl asked him if he had slept well. He said he wouldn't leave her and wouldn't go anywhere. Titi thought he really meant it. It was touching. He told her he'd called a doctor to check on the girl. Tatiana insisted she wasn't sick. Siegfried said that even if she wasn't feeling well, she should still get checked out. There could be hidden problems she wasn't even aware of. If the girl passed the examination calmly, the Duke would allow her to go straight to the library. The girl decided that instead of arguing, she would simply get it over with and go to the library, so Titi agreed. Suddenly, the door opened, and a man entered. He introduced himself. His name was Bernice. He was the ducal family's physician. Tatiana also introduced herself. Bernice said she shouldn't be so formal. The doctor smiled sweetly, and, since they had already introduced themselves, he suggested starting with a stethoscope examination. 10 minutes later, the doctor finished, and said there appeared to be no noticeable problems. However, Tatiana had been feeding poorly for a long time. Her growth was also slightly behind other children. Siegfried was surprised that Titi had grown so little. The doctor said everything was fine. If the girl ate plenty of tasty food from now on, she would grow up healthy and strong. The man took a red candy out of his briefcase and gave it to Tatiana as a reward for her good behavior during the inspection. As soon as the doctor left, Titi said she wanted to go to the library. The Duke dismissed her, and Tatiana was glad. Later, Zig called the doctor again for a talk. He hadn't mentioned it before, but he said the child was having frequent nightmares. She apparently doesn't remember them, but why does she keep dreaming about them? Bernice suggested it might have something to do with psychology. The young lady lived as a slave in the Demon Lord's castle. Siegfried knows better than anyone how demons treat humans. These memories must still live in her subconscious, causing her recurring nightmares. Siegfried asked how he could rid her of her nightmares. The doctor replied that the Duke should ease her anxiety. Sieg thought that Tatiana was most likely very afraid of abandonment. This is evident in how she always wants to be useful to someone. Right now, for Tatiana, Being abandoned by someone would be the most difficult and painful experience. Siegfried suggested keeping a close eye on her in any case. She's a child who hides her pain well. The butler entered with news. The Lord of the Magic Tower and the High Priest had arrived to see the Duke. Siegfried felt he needed to tell them of Tatiana's concerns. The boys were happy to finally see Titi. Kyrgios wondered if Titi was crying because she missed him. Caesar said that was unlikely. Siegfried entered and apologized for keeping them waiting. Kyrgios immediately asked where the little girl was. Sieg replied that he would call her later, as she was in the library. The Duke sat in the center of the table and suggested getting straight to the point. With a serious expression on his face, he stated that they needed to discuss something regarding Tatiana. Siegfried gave her a brief account. Kyrgios said she had no further cause for concern, as she had already left the Demon Lord's castle. Siegfried said that, in the doctor's opinion, the cause was most likely psychological. During Titi's time as a slave in the castle, it's highly likely that her nightmares stemmed from memories of her cruel treatment. After all, such terrible wounds don't heal quickly. In conclusion, the heroes need to ease Tatiana's anxiety so that the little girl no longer has nightmares. And in the Duke's opinion, perhaps she's afraid of being abandoned. The way she tries to appear useful to them is proof of that. Caesar said that in that case, their job was to continue to reassure Titi that she simply needed to grow up well. At the same time, the heroes should gradually acknowledge her efforts. Kyrgios said a 4-year-old shouldn't worry about such things, she should just have fun playing. Caesar said that the guys should support Tatiana and assure her that they will never leave her. Putting down the mugs of tea, Siegfried suggested discussing this further, but directly with Tatiana. Siegfried turned to the butler and asked him to bring Tatiana here. The servant obeyed and went to fetch her. Tatiana was amazed by the size of the library and the number of books in it. Nora was with Titi, and the servant asked if the young lady could read them all. The girl replied that she could. Nora relayed that the Duke had told her the little girl could browse as much as she wanted. The little girl noticed Nora's clothes. The quality of the fabric was too low. After Titi tore Nora's clothes, she began to look closely, wondering if the other servants had the same ones. As Titi had thought, their clothes were hastily sewn from rough fabric, with missing buttons here and there, and even the shoes were worn out. Just like Nora's, the other servants' clothes were also in poor condition. Given Siegfried's honest character and wealth, he would never have cut back on his servants. If he'd been the type to save money, he wouldn't have brought her here in the first place. Raising a child alone is incredibly expensive. In this case, the only person who could possibly intervene in the family's budget, none other than the estate's chief manager, Countess Ghiberti. She is the only one in the mansion draped in luxurious fabrics. But if Tatiana tells Siegfried directly, will a grown man believe the words of a 4-year-old child? Suddenly, the Countess jumped up from behind and took the book from the girl, because the books in this library are extremely valuable. Therefore, the girl should not touch anything indiscriminately and handle them carefully. Titi had no choice but to obey. Now, Countess Ghiberti follows the girl around, ready to find fault with every little thing. The way she picks at the girl's every word is a masterpiece in itself. It's not like the books will rot and crumble just because Titi touches them. The butler came into the library. He apologized for disturbing them and said the Duke had asked him to bring Tatiana. The Countess, for the sake of publicity, grabbed Titi in her arms and hugged her. The woman said that since the Duke was waiting for Titi, she should hurry. Tatiana was very surprised by this gesture from the Countess. The stern lady's voice became unusually gentle. The door opened, and Titi saw the remaining guardians. She was glad to see Kyrgios and Caesar there, but the mountain of books behind them unsettled her. Kyrgios picked up the baby and asked how she had eaten. The Countess approached from behind and said it was a great honor to meet the tower's lord and the high priest. The Duke approached his aunt and asked her to leave them so that his friends could talk in peace. Titi was glad the manager had left. It had only been a day since she'd been separated from her father's, but it felt like an eternity. Caesar asked how Tatiana was doing, and she replied that everything was fine. The girl asked how Kyrgios and Caesar were doing. Before answering, Kyrgios asked what a 4-year-old was doing in the library when she should be running and playing instead. The man started squeezing her cheeks, and Caesar begged him to let go, saying it wasn't safe. The little girl said she wanted to help the adults too. Kyrgios said that then the girl would have to study her letters diligently. Titi said she already knew a lot of letters. Titi asked what kind of books were behind the heroes. These were books on child rearing. Caesar recalled that he had consulted with the priests in charge of the orphanage regarding Titi's education. Since Titi is still young, they recommended using play-based methods to teach basic concepts instead of formal teaching. Kyrgios paused. Caesar said he should think of it as an educational game. The idea is to experience different professions firsthand, to learn what each one entails through direct participation. The girl's body is 4 years old, but her mind is over 20, so she would never do anything like that. This could be the perfect chance for the girl to expose Countess Ghiberti's misdeeds to the Duke. Suddenly, Titi raised her tiny hands and said she wanted to play maid. The heroes were surprised. Caesar asked the girl why she wanted to play maid. Kyrgios added that if she had to choose, why not become a mage instead? Indeed, why does the girl want to play the role of a maid? Her real goal is to expose the Countess's crimes, but she can't say so outright. The maids always take care of Titi, so the little girl wanted to know what they were doing. The maids standing nearby were very touched. Caesar was also touched by Titi's kind heart. The Duke thought she meant to acknowledge the maid's hard work. Kyrgios was also touched. Siegfried smiled at the girl, showing his approval. Siegfried suggested they stick to this plan. At this time, the Countess was indignant. How dare Siegfried treat her like a servant in the presence of others? The woman remembered his request for her to leave, and they'd been talking about Tatiana the whole time. She was terribly angry about it. Lady Ghiberti grinned furiously. How long did Siegfried plan to keep this girl around? That was the only question that tormented the widow. The Duke pours out all his care on this girl, without even thinking about giving even a little of her to his nephews. First thing this morning, he called the doctor to examine her, and now it's play-based learning, or something like that. He treats her with such devotion, as if he were raising his own daughter. Considering Siegfried's initially cold nature, this is truly sensational news. The woman didn't know what tricks Tatiana had resorted to, but the Countess urgently needed to get rid of this girl, and as quickly as possible. Ghiberti went to Nora and asked her to dress the girl in a maid's uniform, since the master said that he wanted to give her a gaming education. In such a position, Ghiberti cannot stand aside and watch this low-born creature inherit the title of Duke. The girl ate and thought about how she could humiliate the Countess on the day of play training, having received permission from the heroes to engage in play training. Lately, she had been keeping a close eye on the opportunity, and suddenly an idea came to her. She needed to see Nora right now. The girl had to check the uniforms, and all the other servants' uniforms too. Titi told Nora that in addition to the maid game they were planning, she also wanted to try out the chef, gardener, and stableboy roles. Tatiana asked if she could meet them. The maid said yes, and suggested they go meet right away. Titi was surprised that such an unsurprising pretext worked so quickly. Nora and Tatiana arrived at the mansion's kitchen. There they were greeted by the cooks. They asked what had brought the young lady to them. Nora said the girl was curious about what was going on in the kitchen. There wasn't any particular reason, but why were they looking at the girl with such tenderness? Tatiana, with a hint of awkwardness in her voice, declared that she wanted to wear an apron like her older sisters, but the maid said there were no new aprons. Then the little girl asked for the one Nora herself wore. The maid said the apron was dirty, but the girl said she really didn't mind. The girl put on an old apron and began to rejoice like a 4-year-old child, but suddenly she was overcome with sadness. From Nora's clothes that used to tear so easily, to the chef's uniform that looks poorly made, even the horse treats aren't supplied properly. Nothing works here properly. Nora suggested we visit the garden for the last time. But as soon as the young lady and the maid entered the garden, they found an oil painting. Countess Ghiberti was scolding the gardener. She said the gardener hadn't planted a red rose, but it really was red. Ghiberti told him he couldn't even properly plant a rose, yet he still got his salary without fail, and then she suddenly kicked him in the knee with the toe of her heel. The man lowered his head in shame and looked at the floor. Ghiberti continued yelling at him. The servants in the mansion were just like her in the demon lord's castle. When she couldn't say anything, the woman asked the gardener why he was just staring and saying nothing. He tried to apologize, but his words were slurred. Such treatment. Tatiana couldn't just stand aside and watch, so she decided to intervene. As the girl walked toward the gardener and Ghiberti, she noticed a watering can. As soon as Titi turned to the manager, her frown deepened. The little girl ran and deliberately tripped over a watering can, spilling its contents all over the Countess's gorgeous dress. She began yelling at the girl, pointing out the dress's price. The little girl pretended to be upset and said she was sorry. She was just running to greet the caretaker. And Titi said that if she had to apologize for soiling her clothes, shouldn't the Countess also apologize to the gardener? The woman asked why she should do that. The girl said that the woman accidentally stepped on her grandfather's pants and stained them, and also that Titi only sees red roses here. The woman felt she was in the wrong and started yelling. She believed there was no point in talking to a child who knew nothing. She suggested Tatiana learn to apologize. And the woman left. At least she wasn't crossing the line. Titi thought Countess Ghiberti might hit her. Luckily, the Countess had just retreated. The girl ran up to her grandfather and asked if he was okay. The gardener thanked the girl. The girl said there was nothing to thank her for, since she had simply stood up for him. Nora ran up to Tatiana. The gardener said that he would like to somehow thank the young lady, although he did not have much money. Grandfather picked the most beautiful rose and asked her to accept it as a sign of gratitude to the girl. Tatiana thanked him. But the girl did this not to get something in return, but because she knew that it was necessary. A few days later, the long-awaited day of game training arrived. Nora approached the girl and began praising her. The girl truly looked simply charming. The girl liked to wear the same clothes as her maid. They were just like sisters. Countess Ghiberti said that this outfit would definitely suit the girl perfectly. It's starting again. She said it was the perfect outfit, befitting TT's status. Since she was wearing it, why not wear it all the time? Nora tried to reprimand the woman, but their status was a huge barrier between them. The Countess approached her and slapped the girl on the arm, telling her she dared not contradict her. Ghiberti grabbed TT by the arm and dragged her down. The girl wanted to be indignant, but the Countess looked at her with a stern gaze and said that they were expected. Nora only has a little more patience left. Today, thanks to this game-based training, Tatiana will definitely put an end to Countess Ghiberti once and for all. Siegfried asked his friends why they were still in his mansion. They were so busy with their own affairs, after all. Kyrgios said the tower wouldn't collapse if he left for a couple of days. And Caesar can safely trust his priests. Besides, they are the little girl's guardians, just like the Duke. They have the right to check how the girl is receiving her gaming education. Tatiana is back. Siegfried thought the girl was very cute. The manager said it might be because she was still a child, but she looked dignified in any outfit. Siegfried told Titi that the outfit suited her very well, and she herself really liked it. The girl also didn't forget to thank the manager for sewing this outfit for her. Swallowing her pride, the woman declared the young lady too kind. Titi began exposing the atrocities committed by Countess Ghiberti. The main thing is to pretend Titi knows nothing, feign delight in the outfit, and mention the servant's condition. Titi said her outfit was durable and definitely wouldn't tear, but Nora's outfit recently tore into pieces, surprisingly. Countess Ghiberti pretended that she did not understand anything, did not understand what was being discussed. The girl said she accidentally pulled on Nora's clothing, and it simply tore. But since the outfit is durable, it definitely won't rip. Titi said she would be careful. Until now, Siegfried hadn't had time to pay attention to the condition of each servant. So, upon hearing this, he'll certainly suspect Ghiberti. After all, he'd put the Countess in charge, but no one was keeping an eye on the servants' clothes. Now he'll definitely pin Ghiberti as the culprit. Tatiana told the manager that she really liked that they wore the same clothes. The woman didn't understand. Titi explained that Nora's clothes had torn very quickly, while the Countess's clothes were very durable. The manager was very worried. Siegfried called her over. So, mission accomplished? But wait, the man asked if he and the Countess could have a heart-to-heart talk. The Duke looked even angrier than the girl had expected. The man summoned Ghiberti to his office. He asked if the lady really thought he wouldn't notice. Ghiberti was enjoying herself quite generously. The mansion's budget, which she had illegally appropriated, was funneled directly to the Ghiberti household, squandered by the Countess's own pity. And to top it all off, the manager subjected the servants to unnecessary punishments. The evidence against the woman is endless. Siegfried asked the woman if she had originally applied for the position with this plan in mind. She tried to justify herself. The woman fell to her knees and begged the Duke for forgiveness, but the Duke refused to grant her the right to call him Lord. From that moment on, Ghiberti was no longer the manager. Every coin she embezzled, along with compensation, will be recovered in full from the House of Ghiberti. Furthermore, all members of her family who were involved will be held accountable. The woman folded her hands in supplication and begged the Duke for forgiveness. She asked him to spare her son and grandchildren. Oh, so the former manager still knows how to value her own family. But why then did she do such terrible things to this child and the servants? The woman clutched her throat. The air began to leave her lungs. She couldn't breathe. The Duke watched silently. He sent her away. When the Duke discovered that she was embezzling property, he had to banish her immediately. Sieg hadn't intended to appoint Countess Ghiberti as his manager from the start. When he set out to conquer the 5 demon lords, Sieg told the man it would take a long time to defeat them. Meanwhile, someone had to take care of the servants and manage the estate. Siegfried was uncertain he'd return alive. The Duke decided to leave it in the care of the man. He told the Duke not to worry and to return safe and sound. If Siegfried died, there had to be someone who could support the servants and pay them compensation. That's why he accepted Countess Ghiberti's proposal. For the same reason, Countess Ghiberti. When the Duke later discovered that she had been embezzling property, he did not banish her immediately because Tatiana, this little girl, often talked about her mother. He wanted her to have at least a brief moment of contact with one of her guardians. Since the Countess had raised not only sons but also grandchildren, Siegfried naively believed that she could help ease Tatiana's sense of loss. And yet, this is what it led to. She must have sensed something and tried to tell him in her own way. He felt he owed Titi and everyone in the mansion an apology. Siegfried returned to the living room, to the guests and the girl. The little girl was very happy to see the Duke. Overjoyed, Tatiana ran into the man's arms, but lost control of her body and slipped. She wasn't hurt, though. When the Duke asked if the girl was hurt, he called her Tati, and the little girl really liked it. The Duke decided to apologize to the little girl. If he had known she was suffering because of this woman, he would have fired her sooner. The man deeply regretted this. The Duke thought that the girl must have found him untrustworthy. The girl wrapped her small hands around the man's fingers. It wasn't that she didn't trust him, she just wanted to be a good child who listened to adults. Lord Siegfried said the girl didn't have to force herself to be a good child. A girl doesn't need to be a useful child. She shouldn't think like that anymore. Tati found this strange. Tatiana is still just a child, having suffered so much. Now is her time to be happy. The girl felt truly protected. From now on, she will be even happier. It had been a long time since she'd felt such peace. Her little game of pretense had successfully ended with the exposure of Countess Ghiberti. After she was thrown out of the mansion, Siegfried made sure that the Countess's family not only returned all the embezzled funds, but also paid a huge compensation. Not that it affected Tati, she decided not to worry about what happened after that. Besides, her acting career has continued since then. Tatiana even mastered such professions as a groom and a gardener. She thought it would be great if clothes had more pockets. And for some reason, every time she discovered some inconvenience for the servants, they immediately began to correct it. The girl simply mentioned the things she found inconvenient. Because of this, every servant who sees Tatiana now desperately tries to offer her something. The amount of attention overwhelms the girl. This is of course very cute, but why can't the girl find a single clue about how to wake up as a demon lord? She'd scoured the entire library, but found nothing about the awakening. Shouldn't there be at least one clue in this house? Even if it was just a mansion, it belonged to the Duke's family. She needs to wake up as soon as possible, so that she can finally control magic. The girl's guardians, Caesar and Kyrios, visited her again. Tatiana was very happy about this. Caesar asked how the girl was feeling, but she was perfectly fine. This was a relief. Since Tatiana was in good health, the Duke suggested that the two of them return to the magic tower and temple and finish their work. Why did he have that expression again? The heroes didn't like Siegfried's behavior either. He considered them merely comrades in arms. Zig didn't like the fact that the boys burst into his mansion without warning, ignoring countless messages from the magic tower and temple calling for them to return. They only came to play with Tatiana. This means they simply ran away without even finishing their work. Kyrgios looked visibly uncomfortable. He said he'd brought something amazing here. He told the little girl to get ready and smile. A box appeared in the air, surrounded by waves of sparks of fire and as yet unknown things. The box obediently fell into the mage's hands, and he handed it to Tati. At first, the girl didn't believe it was a gift for her, and asked again. She was very pleased. Kyrgios asked to open it. Inside was a pair of shoes. The magician said they were apparently popular among children in the capital, and he brought them so the girl could wear them for a walk. Caesar smiled and told the girl to hurry up and put on her new sandals. Kyrgios supported the idea. Siegfried helped the little girl put on her shoes. They fit her perfectly. The magician suggested they take a walk. The girl did and noticed a sound. Every time she took a step, a sound emitted. It was those squeaky shoes that babies wear. Tatiana was a little angry. Physically, she's 4 years old, sure, but mentally she's much older. She shouldn't be wearing something like that. Even the maids said the girl looked gorgeous in them. Everyone gathered around the little girl, praising her appearance. If all it took to make everyone happy was to wear just a pair of shoes, Titi decided to go for a walk in them. Siegfried smiled. The butler arrived and said he had important news for the Duke. A message arrived from the imperial palace. Everyone was surprised why the palace had suddenly contacted them. The butler said they were needed to celebrate the victorious conquest of the demon lords. They were throwing a banquet in honor of their victory. The girl thought about it. More than a month had passed since they returned to the capital, and now they're just now planning a banquet? Since when did the imperial family care about the demon lord's defeat? Exactly. The empire always looked out only for itself. They never once supported the three warriors in any way. Even when neighboring nations fell victim to demons, they simply sat idly by. It was only when the three warriors intervened that the situation changed. If they had truly wanted to help, they would have supported them during the war. Now they simply want to put on a show of heroes. Siegfried said they couldn't refuse the offer. If they were going to the palace, they needed to start working on Tatiana's dress immediately. Hearing the Duke's words about the dress, the girl's eyes lit up with a bright fire. Titi doesn't have anything suitable for the banquet yet. She needs to find a tailor who can do it as soon as possible. If the girl goes to the palace, she will encounter the main character. It is unknown what might happen. In the original story, it was the prince who killed Tatiana. She must avoid going to the palace at all costs. The girl asked if she really had to go. The boys said they would never leave her there alone, but the invitation was for the three of them. Titi said that the three of them had saved so many people, but Tatiana had done nothing, and it would be impolite if she went there. Siegfried said he would not attend the banquet then. Kyrios and Caesar followed his example. Duke Siegfried approached the little girl and said that a guardian should always put his ward first. Kyrgios agreed. Besides, spending time with Titi was much more fun than at some boring banquet. Caesar reprimanded him, saying he was being irrelevant again. Caesar said the mage seemed to be dying, and the priest should check on him later. Kyrios became quite angry. The boys didn't want Titi to feel left out if they left her there. She decided to go, as convincing them turned out to be much more difficult than she expected. The little girl smiled. She needed to think about this in a positive light. The prince wasn't a hero yet, and she hadn't awakened as a demon lord yet. Who knows? Perhaps the key to the girl's awakening as a demon lord is hidden in the Imperial Palace. A week after receiving the letter from the Imperial Palace, the heroes and the girl arrived. The palace looked stunning. They finally arrived for the long-awaited banquet. Kyrios told Titi to stay close to them, as there were many people there, and she could easily get lost. Now the little girl can relax. The reason the girl can only relax now is because, right up until their arrival at the palace, the heroes were still arguing. Each of them presented their own arguments, debating at length what dress Tatiana should wear. Siegfried wanted the girl to wear sky blue. The magician wanted her to wear pink. Caesar, however, favored sky white. If the girl had allowed the heroes to continue arguing in the same spirit, they would most likely have been a long time late for the victory celebration. Only after the little girl told them she would choose her own dress did their little argument finally end. Tatiana chose the yellow dress. And so, after much effort, they finally arrived at the Imperial Palace. Caesar asked the girl to take his hand. The girl noticed that the halls in the Imperial Palace were incredibly luxurious. The Orleans family estate was also magnificent, but it was nothing compared to the imperial one. The girl heard a voice that said that the Duke of Orleans, the hero of the empire, the Lord of the Magic Tower, and the High Priest were now entering. The guardians and the girl stepped out onto the balcony, overlooking the palace's entire colossal banquet hall. The guests' gazes were fixed on them. The boys went downstairs, where they were met by the admiring glances of the palace guests. But rumors also followed them. Most of the crowd talked about the girl. The public couldn't fully accept the girl, after all. She had been taken from the demon castle. Caesar took the girl in his arms. It was the baby's first time in such a public place. The priest was worried about Tatiana, as were the other heroes. The man asked how the girl was feeling. She understood where his question came from. Since everyone was whispering about the girl, she said everything was fine, because she had heroes by her side. A mature, rough, and rather brutal male voice addressed the heroes and the girl. Their gazes turned to the source of the sound. It turned out to be a gray-haired man. He thanked the heroes for their contribution to the empire. Judging by his clothing, he must be Emperor Descartes. Next to the emperor was a woman. She must be the second empress of the Philomel family, and the young man who resembled her was most likely the second prince, Rudolph. And finally, the second child, Rakius Kasser of Esperatne. His golden hair tinged with rust and his ruby eyes, but his expression is downcast. Meeting Tatiana's beloved protagonist, who always seemed so incredible in the novel, leaves a bitter aftertaste. Rakius was born of a union between an emperor and a foreign empress. He is the first prince of the Descartes family and its only legitimate heir. But after the early death of the empress, under the rule of the empress consort, who came from one of the most powerful families of the empire, he suffered constant harassment at the palace, all with the tacit consent of his own father, the emperor. Titi is not in a position to feel sorry for anyone, but she can't help but feel compassion. The emperor said that all humanity owes its lives to heroes. No amount of praise will ever be enough. Emperor Descartes looked at the baby and guessed that this must be the same child that the heroes rescued from the demon castle. The little girl gathered all her strength and manners into a fist and bowed gracefully, greeting the emperor and his entire family. Zig said the girl's name was Tatiana. She was currently under his guardianship and lived on his estate. The duke apparently emphasized the fact that the girl was under his care. The emperor noticed the hero's deep love for the girl. Sieg said the little girl didn't yet know much about court etiquette, and he was afraid she would make a mistake, so he asked permission to leave. The emperor told him to do as he wished, so the heroes took their leave and continued on their way. An hour after arriving, the girl was taken to an empty room and lay down to rest. Having greeted the emperor, Titi thought she could finally enjoy the banquet, but instead, she grew tired of all the people coming to chat with the heroes. Tatiana couldn't stand it anymore, so she said she'd rather stay with the maids. Being with the heroes was too noisy and chaotic. And then, all the heroes looked at her as if they saw a real ghost in front of them. Only after the heroes insisted on leaving the girl in the care of the maids was she finally able to rest from them. The little girl put her hand to her head, showing the maximum level of fatigue, and sighed heavily. Prince Rakius suddenly entered the room. The girl was terrified and didn't understand what he was doing there. The boy looked down. It turned out he was just as tired as the girl and was simply looking for a quiet place. The prince said in a pitiful voice that if Tatiana was bothered by his presence, he would leave the room. Rakius decided to take his leave. Sure, in the novel, he would have tried to kill Tatiana, but otherwise, he's her favorite character. But as soon as he started to leave, the girl grabbed him by the elbow, a little impolitely, asking him to stop. He did. The little girl looked deeply into the young prince's eyes. She already knew the childhood of young Rakius. After the empress's death, he was rejected by the emperor's wife. Because of this, the adult servants surrounding him treated him as if he didn't exist. And Tatiana also knows that, in the end, this young man, rejected by everyone, will take her life as the mistress of demons. But now, when he stands in front of her, even knowing that he is a threat to her, Titi doesn't feel any discomfort at all. Seeing him with such a sad expression on his face, so unbecoming of a child. She felt very clearly that she couldn't let him just leave like that. Titi grabbed the boy's hands and invited him to play with her instead of leaving, because Rakius is the main character of her favorite novel. Rakius is just like little Titi. In the Imperial City, without anyone's support, he endures everything alone. Titi was treated just like she was in the Demon Lord's castle. No one showed her any kindness. That's why little Titi is so eager to help Prince Rakius. After all, she understands the young man's feelings perfectly. She looked at the boy sweetly and said that she really wanted to play with him. Could it be that the prince didn't want to play with Titi? The prince said that wasn't true, but since they were in the middle of a banquet, the young man suggested they have a quiet conversation instead of playing games. Tatiana managed to stop Rakius's departure by inviting him to play, but because he's shunned in the Imperial City, Rakius isn't very talkative, so the little girl had to lead the conversation herself. The girl decided to compliment the prince's beautiful eyes. The prince didn't understand at first, and asked again. The girl said his eyes were like beautiful precious stones. The girl wanted to finish, but someone interrupted her, brazenly bursting into the room and saying that the prince's eyes were red, like a monster's. The one who disturbed their peace and interrupted their conversation turned out to be Prince Rudolph, the second prince of the empire. Why is he here? Rudolph said that the first prince's eye color definitely indicates he has demonic blood. As the icing on the cake, Rudolph added that Rakius was absolutely worthless, and that the blood of a fallen dynasty flowed through his veins. Rakius simply stood silently and listened to the humiliation, which angered the offender. He began shouting at the prince. Tatiana couldn't understand how he could say such terrible things. Rudolph must be acting this way because he felt inferior to Rakius. The prince's red eyes are a characteristic trait inherited by those with Carolingian royal blood in their veins. The Descartes Empire forged an alliance through a political marriage with the Empress, who was the legitimate princess of the Carolingian kingdom. The prince's red eyes are proof of his direct descent. The Carolingian kingdom, located on the border of the demon realm, served as a barrier against demonic invasions before it vanished from the face of the earth. The family of the new empress, who filled the void left by the Carolingian family, is also a distinguished family. She was unrivaled, but even such an empress couldn't violate the principle that in the event of the previous empress's early death, her position would remain vacant. Perhaps because of this, Rudolph felt inferior to Rakius. However, this is too much. The crown prince of the royal family is being humiliated. Why is no one intervening? Shouldn't someone stop this? In her thoughts, the little girl turned to the prince, telling him that he must have always felt lonely. The girl decided she had to stop it, so she intervened and asked Rudolph to stop. Rudolph humiliated her, telling her she was no one to interfere. The second prince asked, just because the heroes brought Titi here, does she think she's on the same level? They kept the royal family waiting, not because their family is of a lower status than the heroes, but because this time, they deliberately waited for the heroes first. Rakius didn't understand why this affected him too, and he was angry at him for supposedly keeping him waiting. Rudolph said they shouldn't have had a victory celebration in the first place. Titi couldn't take it anymore. While the heroes were fighting in the demon castle, what was the royal family doing? They did nothing, and now they're acting petty? The girl wasn't one to be timid and decided to respond. She said that, thanks to the heroes, everyone was now safe. If it were her, she would be grateful to those who saved her, and she is truly grateful to the heroes for saving her. And in the Demon Lord's castle, she saw no one but heroes. What was the royal family doing during this time? Tatiana decided to ask. And finally, little Titi added that the eyes of the first prince are not the eyes of a monster at all. They sparkle like cherries, beautiful eyes like the most wonderful precious stones. This made the first prince embarrassed. Rudolph started yelling at the girl and was about to hit her when the maid intervened. The little girl should have avoided the blow. Tatiana had already closed her eyes, resigned to the blow, but it never came. She opened them and saw Rakius holding the second prince's hand. The first prince said that, having left the front lines to the heroes, the royal family kept aloof. Rudolph couldn't understand how he could say such a thing, being a prince of the empire. The prince laughed. Just a moment ago, Rudolph had called him a commoner, and now he was calling him a prince of the empire. Rudolph begged the first prince to let go of his hand. Duke Siegfried burst into the room, asking what was going on. The man approached the children and turned to Tatiana, asking how she was feeling, as he had heard a loud noise. Kyrios and Caesar, as well as the royal family, burst in after Siegfried. The empress saw Rakius clutching her son's hand and ran toward them. The mage and priest approached Tatiana, clearly worried about her. Then Rudolph cried out, calling his mother to look at his hand, which had turned red. She ran to him. The empress buried her son in her chest, calming him down, and at the same time shouting at the first prince, scolding him. The woman asked where the rude first prince took his cues from. The boy was hurt and offended, but his face remained impassive. The girl watched all this and realized that Rudolph had caused the trouble first. If this continued, Rakius would find himself at a disadvantage. Miss Tatiana had made her decision. If Rakius couldn't protect himself, she would protect him. The girl stood firmly on her feet and said with a serious expression that the first prince had done nothing wrong. Little Titi simply couldn't let the first prince take all the blame. Kyrgios and Siegfried didn't understand anything. The Duke asked for clarification. The girl said that Rodolphe had tried to hit her. The heroes' faces immediately darkened. Caesar asked if this was true. The girl confirmed it. Having collected her thoughts, Tatiana said that the first prince had protected the girl from Rudolph. Rakius blushed. This was also why the first prince grabbed his half-brother by the wrist. Rudolph became nervous and began shouting at the girl to tell him not to lie. The girl began shouting over him and said she wasn't lying. Besides, the second prince said Rakius's eyes were red, like a monster's. The little girl continued to reveal the truth and said that Rudolph called Rakius a non-entity, saying that he was just a remnant of a fallen dynasty. The second prince was already incredibly nervous. Realizing that all his lies had been exposed, he turned to his mother and said that everything Tatiana had said was a lie. Siegfried turned to Rudolph. Tatiana had only been in the empire for less than a month. She couldn't have known about the late empress, nor that red eyes were a trait exclusive to the direct line of the Carolingian royal family. Kyrgios added that a child who knew nothing about the Carolingians could have invented such an insult. Do they really believe it? Wouldn't it be more reasonable to assume that she simply repeated what she heard? The empress said that dismissing the child's words as a mere coincidence seemed rather difficult. The magician said that the insult the second prince directed at the first prince was an extremely dangerous statement. If the words of the second prince had spread to the former Carolingian territories, now under imperial rule, wouldn't this provoke an extremely negative reaction? The girl thought that even the empress wouldn't be able to refute it, so that's why she remained silent. The Carolingian Empire knew that the empire stood by, watching their fall, but they had voluntarily become part of the empire solely because of the empress and Rakius. And now that the empress was gone, and only Rakius remained, such an insult would cause great resentment among the Carolingian people. Even without that reason, what the second prince said must have deeply hurt Rakius. And yet, that calm expression returned to his face. Perhaps Titi should say something to console him? And as luck would have it, little Titi started coughing. The demonic energy had been calm lately, but now, the heroes immediately became agitated and turned their attention to the little girl. Tatiana should have rested, but while Rakius is still under suspicion, the girl cannot leave. Duke Siegfried picked up the girl and held her close to his chest. But if the girl left, what would happen to Rakius? The girl's hands and feet were freezing. The heroes needed to immediately get her somewhere she could rest. Exhausted, she still insisted that the first prince had done nothing wrong. Caesar said the girl needed to focus on resting. The girl said the second prince called her a liar and wanted to hit her, and she was very scared. Titi only wanted to help because the second prince had spoken ill of the first. Apparently, stress had gotten the demonic energy out of control. The emperor wanted to call a doctor, but Siegfried said they should return to the estate. The heroes were already leaving, but the emperor tried to stop them because the banquet was in their honor. He wanted to summon the imperial physician. The duke apologized and said they still had to go. The imperial family remained in the room, and everyone watched the heroes depart. The emperor thought this was the height of ingratitude, to dare to disgrace the royal family like this. Rakius felt ashamed. Because of him, the fragile child who had protected him had ended up in this situation. The first prince decided he couldn't let Lady Tatiana go so easily. If he let her go now, he wouldn't be able to thank her properly. As soon as the prince started to run, the empress tried to stop him, but he apologized and said that he did not have time to explain. The prince caught up with the heroes. Siegfried said that Lady Tatiana urgently needed rest. The first prince said that he understood the circumstances, but asked to still be allowed to thank the girl. The heroes moved on, but Rakius did not stop asking why Lady Tatiana had woken up. The girl said she was already feeling better. The prince came closer and thanked Titai for being by his side. After hesitating for a while, Rakius finally made up his mind and asked if he could visit her. The girl extended her little finger to the prince so that he would promise to definitely visit the baby. The boy approached and extended his little finger in return. Soon, Titi and the heroes left. It was the first time anyone had defended Rakius. No one had ever been on his side. Even his own family. No, actually, his family was the first to abandon him. He thought, if Tatiana had really learned everything about the first prince, would she have distanced herself from him in the same way? But even if this happens, the young prince will definitely visit the girl, because he made a promise. Several days had passed since they returned from the imperial palace. During this time, Titi had fully recovered under the care of her guardians. But she's been suffering for several days from reading the Defender's Tales, and it all started with a single remark from Bernice. Kyrgios also couldn't stand Siegfried's reading, and took the book of fairy tales from him. And Kyrgios began reading the story about the little kitten and the teacher, but it was so terrifying. He wasn't reading, it was like he was rapping. Caesar said that at this rate, Titi's eardrums would burst. The magician thought he could read just fine. The heroes and the doctor gathered around the table. The doctor said the girl was still 4 years old, and her pronunciation wasn't perfect, but that was normal. The doctor said that if the heroes really wanted to be helpful, they should just read the girl a bedtime story. It all started because Bernice accidentally mentioned her slurred pronunciation. The girl thought her pronunciation wasn't so bad. It was all Bernice's fault. Suddenly, the butler entered the room and announced that the first prince had just arrived at the mansion. The girl was delighted to see the protagonist. He even chose the perfect time. She could use this as an excuse to escape. Without waiting for anyone, the little girl ran out of her room. She ran to the balcony and saw the prince. The young prince looked up at the balcony and smiled. He greeted the girl. The prince asked if the girl was sure she was well enough to stand on her feet. Titi said she was much better. The boy said that the trouble the girl encountered at the banquet was entirely his fault, and he apologized for it. The girl said it was absolutely not His Highness's fault, and he certainly didn't need to apologize for it. Titi also reminded him that the one who offended her was the second prince, not the first. It wasn't because of the first prince, so he shouldn't dwell on it. Kyrios intervened in the children's conversation and said that Rudolph had treated both Titi and the first prince very badly, so of course the girl had resisted. Siegfried and Caesar came down. The Duke invited the young prince to tea. Siegfried told the first prince that they needed to discuss something. Meanwhile, Kyrios called Tatiana to him. The Duke curtsied and told the prince that, as an imperial aristocrat, he must remind him that the crown prince should not bow his head so easily. But even if His Highness was innocent this time, Rakius's willingness to apologize was admirable. This is the most important quality of a ruler. Kyrios wanted Tatiana to listen to him for a second, but she asked, "Why are they doing this?" And the Lord of the Magic Tower began spouting absolute nonsense, and so loudly it was deafening. Little Titai didn't understand a thing. The magician said that all men are wolves. He meant that the first prince looked quite respectable and was quite polite, but you never know. He asked the girl to remain vigilant, but the girl did not listen to him and simply went to Siegfried and the first prince. The little girl took the first prince by the hand and, with a smile, invited him to have a snack with her. All the heroes were very surprised by the girl's courage, and of course, as fathers, they were worried. The girl persuaded the prince to go with her. Incidentally, Nora had made a cherry pie for them. The young man's cheeks suddenly turned a soft pink. He smiled back and asked if she was talking about the cherry pie that resembled the color of his eyes. Tatiana was glad that Rakius was finally smiling. At first, there had always been a shadow of sadness on his face. His gaze was too distant for a child, as if he had already resigned himself to everything. But as they spent more time together, he gradually began to smile more often. And on the last day, when Rakius left, there was no longer a trace of sadness on his face. It was as if all the worst things had disappeared from the boy's thoughts, and he had become just an ordinary happy child. All that remained on his face was a bright, radiant smile, which only added to the magic of his wonderful eyes. The next day, a letter of apology from the emperor arrived at the Orlean estate. Siegfried burned it as soon as he saw it. Duke Siegfried considered that there was no need to reply to this letter, and Caesar completely agreed with him. Kyrgios was furious. The mere thought of that little bastard laying a hand on that child, it made his blood boil. The magician suggested giving the child official status to ensure that no one could ever treat her carelessly again. Caesar said that the most effective way was to adopt the girl as a legitimate child.